So in this video, I want to talk about ghosts. Basically what they are, if they're real, and if so, what they're doing here. You might hear that banging in the background. People are shooting in my backyard, so don't mind that. But the thing with ghosts, the biggest thing with ghosts is it seems like a big battle as to whether or not they're real, whether you believe them or you don't, I've seen ghosts, or no, that's impossible, you were seeing things, right? That's always been really interesting to me, the idea of ghosts and the ability for something to remain in a certain way after its body has passed, right? And what I've found interesting about these ghosts is that they always seem to be taking place in the context of the scenario that they passed in. So say somebody dies playing in the barn, and they die in some way out in the barn, and the family that moves into that house hears voices out in the barn or something like that. What I mean is that these ghost encounters seem to take place within the context of how they passed. You don't see a ghost, a person that died in France, haunting some random house in America. Often, at least, So, besides it being this big battle of whether or not it's real, I am very fascinated with the idea of being able to see this, and if so, what is it, What is it if you are able to see the residual images of a past life, Are they still real? Are they still here in a different way? Am I remembering something? It's a broad stroke what these ghosts could be. For a while, I thought that seeing ghosts was a sort of hallucination, a sort of suggestible hallucination, in the same way that dreams kind of work, where you walk into this house and you have this backstory of who used to live there, how they acted, what went down in that house, how they died, right? And then you see a person in the context of that story doing one of those things, carrying out one of those actions that relates to that story, and you think to yourself, that must be the ghost of that person. It relates so closely to the story, right? And whether you're alone or the group of people, a shared hallucination, which makes it a little bit more interesting, because you just saw the same thing as a bunch of people, right? But that doesn't excuse it as what happened, right? You could have all very well been under the influence of the same story, the same feelings, the same perceptions, right? That was my idea, was that maybe ghosts were this sort of suggestible hallucination based off the set and setting you were in, kind of like a psychedelic headspace where you're imagining that you're seeing people, right? And you begin to see shadows and faces and all that stuff, even if you're not even trying to, right? You feel like there's something there in that context. Now, disregarding the idea of them being a hallucination, it happened, right? It doesn't matter if it was a hallucination or not, because after all, I personally believe this is all some sort of hallucination. So, the idea to see the residual imagery of somebody who used to be in that area, me and my brother really talked about this and what that may be. And at first, we had this idea that it's sort of like residual energy, meaning everything you do in your life, every word you say, every thought you have, every step you take is kind of this sequence of experience taking place in the form of energy. It may appear to be matter or thought or sound or whatever it is, but it's all this big play of energy. And me and my brother had this idea that seeing a ghost or something of that nature is, in essence, seeing the residual energy of their experience, right? You're seeing what they did, what they went through, the way they acted, what their problems were, maybe, whatever it may be. What you're seeing is the residual of their experience. Like, in some way or another, it remains somehow. We don't know how, or even if that's what's going on, but it was an idea. And another idea of what these ghosts were, or are, is a sort of backtracking of their experience, where something somewhere caused this disturbance to turn up. My brother made the example that me taking these and throwing them up in the air like that just happened. I just did that. And maybe somewhere, somehow, somebody else could be walking down the road and see this person throw this thing up in the air, and then all of a sudden it disappears, right? Basically, it's repeating the same action that I just did in a different location, different timing, different way, something like that. And we started to think that maybe seeing these ghosts is a sort of echo. It's a sort of vibrational echo of what they're doing, you know? We thought of the idea that, like, as you're alive, you are moving this way, right? Kind of like dropping something in a pond, and the rings move outward, and inevitably, when they hit the edges, they bounce back at each other. And we are all here moving outward. We were making the analogy that our life, the transitioning of this life, is these rings moving outward. And as people pass, they begin to bounce back. They begin to bounce inward. And there's so many people here, there's so many works and plays of energy, that as you die and begin to bounce back off of the edge of life, if that's what you want to call it, things that are moving towards it catch up on it, you know, and they pick up on it, and that wave, that bounce back wave, is perceived, you know, in one way or another. And this is a whole just theory, you know, that seeing a ghost is interfering with the echo of its experience, you know. Something in you allowed it to be seen. I don't know. The idea of ghosts is a very interesting thing, that these spirits of past history are remaining in our realm in a way that we can't steadily perceive. So that's basically it for this video. I hope you thought it was kind of cool, and I will be back with more.